What happens when a defending nation stops playing defense and starts strangling its enemy's lifeline? What happens when 3 bridges collapse in a single coordinated strike, and suddenly thousands of soldiers find themselves trapped on the wrong side of a river with no way to retreat, no way to resupply, and no way to survive? If that satisfies your curiosity even a little, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with someone who follows what's happening in this war. Because what you are about to hear is one of the most strategically brilliant moves Ukraine has pulled off in the entire conflict. And most people have no idea it even happened. Let me take you into the heart of this story. For months now, Russia has been pushing hard in certain sectors of the front line. They have thrown wave after wave of infantry, armored vehicles, and artillery at Ukrainian positions. And in many areas, they have made gains. Small, costly, bloody gains. But gains nonetheless. The Western media has been filled with headlines about Ukrainian struggles, about manpower shortages, about ammunition running low. And yes, some of that is true. War is brutal, and Ukraine has faced enormous pressure from every direction. But here is what most people miss. Ukraine has not just been absorbing blows, it has been watching, studying, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment. And when that moment arrived, it struck with surgical precision at the one thing Russia cannot afford to lose: its supply lines, the very arteries that keep its war machine alive. Now, to understand why these 3 bridges matter so much, you need to understand something fundamental about how modern armies survive. An army does not fight on courage alone. It fights on logistics, fuel, ammunition, food, medical supplies, replacement troops, spare parts for vehicles, communication equipment. All of this has to flow constantly from the rear to the front. If that flow stops, the army at the front does not just slow down. It begins to die, slowly at first, then all at once, like a body losing blood. The heart keeps beating, but without fresh blood, every organ starts to fail. And how does this supply flow move? Through roads, through railways, and most critically, through bridges. Because rivers are natural barriers. You cannot drive a fuel truck through a river. You cannot carry crates of ammunition across a flooded waterway on foot. You cannot move heavy armored vehicles across deep water without a solid crossing point. You need bridges. And when those bridges are gone, everything changes in an instant. This is exactly what Ukraine understood. And this is exactly what Ukraine targeted with ruthless precision. The 3 bridges that were destroyed were not random targets chosen from a map. They were carefully selected choke points. Each one of them carried a massive volume of Russian military traffic. Troops moving forward to the front, supplies moving forward to sustain those troops, wounded soldiers moving backward for medical treatment, command vehicles carrying officers, communication equipment, fuel tankers, ammunition trucks. Everything Russia needed to sustain its operations in that sector flowed across these 3 bridges, like blood through veins. And Ukraine took them all out, every single one. Now let me walk you through how this likely happened, because the method matters just as much as the result. Ukraine has become incredibly skilled at long-range precision strikes over the course of this war. They have developed and received a range of weapons capable of hitting targets far behind the front lines with devastating accuracy. Western-supplied missiles like HIMARS with GPS-guided rockets have been a nightmare for Russian logistics throughout this conflict. But Ukraine has also developed its own drone technology to an extraordinary degree. Long-range kamikaze drones that can fly hundreds of kilometers to hit a specific target. Reconnaissance drones that can loiter over an area for hours, feeding real-time intelligence back to command centers. First-person view drones that can strike with incredible accuracy at close range. What likely happened is this. Ukrainian intelligence identified these 3 bridges as critical nodes in the Russian supply network. They monitored traffic patterns over days and weeks. They studied the timing of convoys. They figured out when these bridges were most heavily used and most vulnerable. They mapped out the defensive positions around each bridge, and then they struck, possibly using a combination of missile systems and coordinated drone attacks, hitting all 3 in a carefully planned operation designed to maximize chaos and minimize Russia's ability to respond or repair. Think about that for a moment. 3 bridges, not 1, not 2, 3, all taken out in what appears to be a single operational window. That is not luck. That is not a random strike. That is not an accident. That is a deliberate, calculated, methodical chokehold designed to strangle Russian forces in that sector. And the word chokehold is exactly right. Because what happens next is where the real damage begins. The damage that does not make headlines, but wins wars. When those bridges went down, every Russian unit on the far side of the river suddenly found itself in a nightmare scenario. Their supply lines were cut instantly. No more ammunition coming forward. No more fuel for their tanks and armored vehicles. No more food for troops who were already exhausted and hungry. No more medical evacuations for the wounded who were bleeding and dying. And perhaps most terrifyingly, no easy route for retreat if things got worse. This is the exact same strategy Ukraine used so brilliantly in the Kherson counteroffensive back in 2022. Remember that? Ukraine spent weeks systematically destroying bridges across the Dnipro River, slowly isolating Russian forces on the western bank. Russia kept sending troops across, kept trying to hold that territory, kept pouring resources into a position that was becoming more unsustainable by the day. And Ukraine kept cutting the bridges, one by one, strike after strike. Eventually, Russia had no choice but to withdraw. Thousands of troops had to be pulled back in a humiliating retreat because they simply could not be sustained without those bridges. It was one of the most significant Ukrainian victories of the entire war, and now Ukraine is doing it again. Different location, different bridges, different phase of the war. Same devastating logic, same brilliant strategy. But this time, there is strong evidence that Ukraine has learned even more from that earlier success and refined its approach. The strikes appear to have been faster, more coordinated, and more comprehensive than what we saw in Kherson. Instead of slowly degrading the bridges over weeks, giving Russia time to adapt, Ukraine seems to have taken them out in rapid succession, giving Russia almost no time to react, adapt, or find alternative routes. Let me explain why that speed matters so much. When you destroy a bridge slowly, the enemy has time to react. They can set up pontoon crossings nearby. They can reroute supply convoys along different roads. They can bring in engineering units to attempt repairs. They can stockpile supplies on the far side in anticipation of a cut. But when you take out 3 bridges almost simultaneously, the enemy is paralyzed. Their logistics officers are suddenly scrambling with no good options. Every plan they had is obsolete in an instant. Every convoy that was scheduled is now stuck with nowhere to go. Every unit that was expecting resupply is now waiting for something that will not come. The entire system freezes, and this is where the psychological dimension comes in, because war is not just physical, it is mental, it is emotional. It is about willpower and belief. Imagine you are a Russian soldier at the front. You have been fighting for days without rest. You are low on ammunition. Your rifle is running out of rounds. You have wounded comrades who need evacuation desperately. And then word comes down the line that the bridges behind you are gone. All of them, every single one. No resupply is coming. No evacuation is possible. No reinforcements will arrive. You are on your own. What does that do to morale? What does that do to a soldier's willingness to fight? What does that do to unit cohesion? It destroys it completely. And demoralized troops make mistakes. They panic, they surrender, they retreat in disorder. They become combat ineffective even before a single additional shot is fired at them. The battle is lost in their minds before it is lost on the ground. Now, if this breakdown of modern warfare strategy is opening your eyes, take 2 seconds and tap that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notification so you never miss an update. This channel breaks down what is really happening on the battlefield, not just the headlines, but the deep strategy behind them. And if you think this video deserves more attention, drop a comment below telling me what you think about Ukraine's bridge strategy and share it on your social media. Your support keeps this channel going and helps us reach more people who care. Now, let us go deeper into why this matters beyond just one sector of the front line, because the implications are enormous. Russia's logistics system has been one of its greatest weaknesses throughout this entire war, from the very first days of the full-scale invasion. In February 2022, Russia struggled to keep its forces supplied. Remember the famous 40-mile convoy north of Kyiv, that massive column of military vehicles that just sat on the road for days, completely stalled, unable to move forward because of fuel shortages and logistical breakdowns? Vehicles ran out of diesel. Tires went flat on cheap Chinese tires that could not handle the conditions. Troops sat in their vehicles waiting for supplies that never came. That was not an accident or bad luck. That was a symptom of a deep, systemic problem in how Russia moves and sustains its military forces. Russia's military relies heavily on rail and road networks for logistics. Unlike Western armies, which have invested heavily in flexible, decentralized, truck-based supply systems that can adapt quickly to changing conditions, Russia still depends enormously on fixed infrastructure. Railways, major highways, and yes, bridges. When those fixed points are taken out, the entire system begins to collapse like a house of cards. There is no flexibility. There is no backup plan. There is just chaos. Ukraine has figured this out completely. And more importantly, Ukraine has figured out how to exploit it with devastating efficiency and precision. These 3 bridge strikes are not isolated incidents. They are not lucky hits. They are part of a broader Ukrainian strategy that has been evolving and improving throughout the war. A strategy that focuses on what military planners call interdiction. Interdiction means attacking the enemy's ability to move, supply, and reinforce its frontline forces. Instead of trying to destroy the enemy's army head-on in costly frontal assaults, which consume enormous amounts of lives and equipment, you cut off its ability to sustain itself. You starve it. You choke it. You let logistics do the killing for you, and it works. And this is where Ukraine's Western allies have played a crucial and often underappreciated role. The precision weapons provided by the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and other nations have given Ukraine the ability to hit targets with pinpoint accuracy from distances that were previously impossible for the Ukrainian military. HIMARS rockets can strike targets up to 80 kilometers away with GPS precision. Storm Shadow and Scalp cruise missiles can reach even further, hitting targets deep behind Russian lines. And Ukraine's own rapidly evolving drone technology has added another layer of capability that is frankly revolutionary, and unlike anything we have seen in modern warfare before. The combination of Western precision weapons and Ukrainian ingenuity and adaptability has created a military force that punches far above its weight class. Russia may have more soldiers, Russia may have more tanks, Russia may have more artillery pieces, but Ukraine has precision. Ukraine has intelligence. Ukraine has creativity. And Ukraine has the strategic vision to use those advantages where they matter most, at the critical vulnerabilities of the Russian war machine. Now let us talk about what this means for Putin specifically, because these bridge strikes are not just a tactical problem for some Russian general in the field. They are a strategic headache for the Kremlin itself, and they come at a time when Putin can least afford another headache. Russia's economy is under enormous strain. Western sanctions have cut off access to critical technology, particularly semiconductors and advanced electronics, needed for precision weapons and modern military equipment. Inflation is rising sharply. The ruble has been under sustained pressure. Interest rates have been hiked dramatically, and the war itself is consuming vast resources at an alarming rate. Every missile fired costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. Every tank lost costs millions to replace, if it can be replaced at all. Every bridge that needs to be rebuilt costs time, materials, and engineering resources. Every soldier who needs to be paid, equipped, fed, housed, and trained represents an ongoing drain on the national budget. When Ukraine destroys 3 bridges, it is not just destroying concrete and steel. It is destroying Russian resources. It is forcing Russia to divert engineering units, construction materials, heavy equipment, time, and money to rebuild those bridges or find alternative routes. And while they are doing that, while they are scrambling to solve the logistics puzzle, the troops on the other side are deteriorating rapidly. Equipment is running out of fuel. Ammunition stockpiles are shrinking day by day. Food and water supplies are dwindling. Medical supplies are running out. The clock is ticking for every soldier cut off from resupply. This is the chokehold. It is slow, it is methodical, it is patient, and it is incredibly effective. Putin is facing a dilemma with no good solutions. He can try to rebuild the bridges, but Ukraine will almost certainly strike them again the moment they become operational. He can try to set up pontoon crossings, but those temporary bridges are highly vulnerable to drone attacks, artillery strikes, and missile hits. He can try to reroute supplies along longer, more exposed, more dangerous roads, but that takes additional time and fuel that he may not have, and those routes are also vulnerable to Ukrainian interdiction. Or he can pull his troops back entirely, conceding hard-won territory and admitting defeat in that sector, which is politically devastating for a leader who has staked everything on this war. None of these options are good for Putin. And that is exactly the point. Ukraine has put him in a position where every single choice leads to a bad outcome. That is what a chokehold does. It does not give you a way out. It does not offer an escape. It just tightens. Slowly, steadily, relentlessly. And here is something else that deserves serious attention. The timing of these strikes was not random. They did not happen in a vacuum. They happened in the context of a broader Ukrainian operational plan that spans multiple fronts and multiple target categories. Ukraine has been conducting strikes against Russian military infrastructure across the entire theater of operations. Ammunition depots deep inside Russian-occupied territory have been hit and destroyed in spectacular explosions. Command posts have been targeted and eliminated. Air defense systems have been hunted and destroyed. Fuel storage facilities have been set ablaze. Railway junctions have been struck, and now bridges. This is not a desperate country throwing punches randomly hoping something lands. This is a coordinated, intelligent, multi-layered campaign designed to systematically degrade Russia's ability to fight. And the evidence suggests it is working remarkably well. The evidence is there if you know where to look. Russian mill bloggers, those independent military commentators who often provide far more honest assessments than the official Russian state media, have been sounding the alarm for months. They talk openly about supply shortages at the front. They talk about units being sent into battle without adequate ammunition to sustain a fight. They talk about vehicles breaking down because there are no spare parts available anywhere. They talk about soldiers going days without proper food or clean water. They talk about wounded men waiting hours or days for evacuation that sometimes never comes. These are the symptoms of a logistics system that is breaking down under sustained pressure. And every bridge Ukraine destroys makes it worse. Every supply depot that burns makes it worse. Every railway junction that is cratered makes it worse. The cumulative effect is devastating. Now, I want to talk about the human dimension of this, because it is easy to get lost in strategy and logistics and maps and forget that real human beings are affected by these decisions on both sides. On the Russian side, there are soldiers who are now trapped or cut off because of these bridge strikes. Many of them did not choose to be there. Many of them were mobilized against their will, pulled from their families and their jobs, given minimal training that barely prepared them for combat, and sent to the front with equipment that was often outdated or poorly maintained. For them, the destruction of these bridges is not a strategic abstraction discussed in a war room. It is a potential death sentence. Without resupply, they will run out of ammunition and be unable to defend themselves. Without evacuation routes, the wounded among them will die slowly from injuries that could have been easily treated at a field hospital. Without a way to retreat, they face the grim choice of fighting to the death or surrendering to an enemy they have been told will not treat them well. And on the Ukrainian side, there are soldiers and intelligence officers and planners who work tirelessly to identify, plan, and execute these strikes, knowing that their success could save hundreds or even thousands of Ukrainian lives, because every Russian unit that is cut off and rendered combat ineffective is a unit that cannot attack Ukrainian positions. Every supply convoy that cannot reach the front is a convoy's worth of artillery shells that will not fall on Ukrainian towns and cities where civilians are trying to survive. This is the terrible, heartbreaking mathematics of war. Every decision involves calculating lives saved against lives taken, and right now, Ukraine is doing that mathematics better than Russia. More efficiently, more precisely, more strategically. Before I get into the final part of this story, I want to say something directly to you, the person watching this right now. If you have watched this far, you are clearly someone who cares deeply about understanding the world beyond the surface-level news headlines and social media clips. That means a lot to me and to this channel. The best way you can support this kind of in-depth, thoughtful content is incredibly simple. Just hit that like button. It takes 1 second of your time, and it tells the YouTube algorithm to show this video to more people who care about these critical issues. And if you have not subscribed yet, honestly, what are you waiting for? Join this community. We are building something meaningful here, a place where people come to truly understand what is happening in the world. Now, let us bring this all together and understand the bigger picture. The destruction of these 3 bridges is more than a military victory on a map. It is a statement. It is a message. It is Ukraine telling Russia and telling the entire world that it will not simply absorb punishment and wait passively for negotiations to save it. It will fight back. It will fight smart. It will fight with precision. And it will target the very foundations of Russia's war machine until those foundations crumble. Putin has built his entire war strategy around one central idea: that Russia can outlast Ukraine. That Russia has more people, more resources, more weapons, more industrial capacity, and more willingness to endure suffering. And to some extent, that calculation has merit. Russia is a bigger country with a bigger population, a bigger military, and a bigger economy, even under sanctions. But size is not everything. It has never been everything. History is filled with examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones through superior strategy, better technology, greater adaptability, and stronger will. David and Goliath is not just a biblical story. It is a proven military principle that has played out on battlefields across centuries. And Ukraine is proving it right now, every single day, with every precision strike. These bridge strikes are a perfect illustration. Russia has more bridges across its territory. Russia has more engineering units capable of construction. Russia has more raw resources to rebuild damaged infrastructure. But Ukraine has the precision to destroy exactly the right bridges at exactly the right time in exactly the right sequence. And that precision, that intelligence, that strategic clarity is worth more than all the concrete and steel and engineering battalions in Russia. As we look ahead, the question is not whether Ukraine can continue this strategy. It clearly can, and it clearly will. The question is whether Russia can adapt fast enough to survive it. Can Russia find a way to protect its critical supply lines from precision strikes? Can it build meaningful redundancy into its rigid logistics network? Can it develop effective countermeasures against Ukrainian drones and missiles? Can it change its military culture fast enough to respond to a faster, smarter enemy? So far, the answer has been no. Russia has struggled to adapt throughout this entire war. Its military culture, which emphasizes rigid top-down command structures and actively discourages initiative and creativity at lower levels, makes it painfully slow to respond to unexpected challenges and innovative tactics. And Ukraine keeps creating unexpected challenges. Every month brings new tactics, new weapons, new approaches that Russia has to figure out how to counter. The chokehold is tightening with every passing week. The bridges are gone, the supply lines are cut, the troops are stranded. And somewhere deep in the Kremlin, behind closed doors, the people around Putin are starting to realize something that many outside observers and military analysts have understood for a long time. This war is not going the way Russia planned, not even close. And it may never go the way Russia planned. Ukraine chose to fight not with brute force, but with intelligence. Not with overwhelming numbers, but with devastating precision. Not by matching Russia's strength pound for pound, but by targeting Russia's deepest weakness with relentless focus. And in war, throughout all of human history, the side that understands its enemy's weakness better than the enemy understands its own weakness will always hold the decisive advantage. 3 bridges. That is all it took to change the entire equation in a critical sector of the front line. 3 bridges. And suddenly Russia is scrambling. Its soldiers are stranded and desperate. Its logistics officers are panicking. And Putin is faced with a set of choices that all lead nowhere good. That is the power of strategy. That is the power of precision. That is the power of fighting smart instead of fighting big. And that is why this moment matters, far more than most people will ever realize. The bridges are down, the chokehold is on, and the clock is ticking for Russia.